Indigo Land are one of my favourite bands. I discovered them a long time ago and I've since seen them live a couple of times and even bought this cup. From indie shoegaze adjacent local band to selling out live houses to some major chart hits and some controversies, they've enjoyed a full and mostly steady career in the Japanese music industry. I'm making this to talk a bit about the early years of the group before they were on a major label as a way to not only indulge in glazing my favourite band, but to put the argument to you that their success wasn't just a lucky accident. The band was formed by guitarist and songwriter Enon Kawatani. He was born Kenta Kawatani in Nagasaki Prefecture in the late 80s and is admitted to having a fairly uneventful childhood, with things becoming more interesting when he went to high school and then university. By 2009, Kawatani was studying at a university in Tokyo where he met bassist and long-term collaborator Masao Wada, known by many names including Kyujitsu Kacho. The duo were members of a light music club at the university, and it's around this time that Kawatani notes in interviews that he started thinking about pursuing music seriously as a career. Growing up, he had listened to the pop music of the time, citing the likes of Spitz, TM Revolution and Morning Musume. He particularly liked Spitz, taking the Indigo from their 1996 album Indigo Chihei-sen, which is a pretty good album. At university, he started exploring alternative music, starting with the likes of Radiohead and Yura Yura Teikoku and increasingly getting into noise music. It's worth noting there was a lot of bands at this time in Tokyo and they would have been exposed to a mix of shoegaze, which was quite popular, and a kind of alternative rock that was born out of the late 90s scene in Japan. By 2010, Kacho and Kawatani had been joined by Curtis Osada on guitar and Yusuke Oda on drums, finishing the lineup for Indigo Land. The band started playing shows in Tokyo, with the first one being at Basement Bar in Shimokitazawa on February 24th, 2010. Their sound was a mix of the aforementioned shoegaze, kind of toe-adjacent math rock, and the up-tempo pop rock style of the time. Though filming and photographing concerts is more rare in Japan than it is in other places, particularly back then, there's some surviving footage of them playing which lets us hear what they sounded like at that time. The band's first release, to my knowledge, was as part of this compilation CD from Jackman Records. This came out in 2011 and it has something to do with Rockin' On, which is a music publication here, and their Countdown Japan festival. A lot of the bands involved in this won prizes, guess like a Battle of the Bands or some kind of music showcase, and one of the prizes must have been a place on this compilation. They're track 2 on the CD with their song Sensitivity. Sensitivity won't sound alien to anyone who's heard some of the band's early work. The chord voicings and Kawatani's voice play a huge part in identifying the band's sound, but for me the phrasing and the rhythm is the most important piece. This might be most noticeable in Osada's lead playing. It's very flowing and has an emphasis on repeated phrases. Sensitivity is a great introduction to the band. The production is more on the side of a demo, but that's in comparison with the band's later work. You know, I think of their music and I think really well produced, well mixed, great performances. This feels a bit on the cheaper side, but you have to cut them slack. It was their first release. They described themselves in press for this as a neo-shoegaze pop band, which is interesting to me because it hints at not only their alternative influences, but their pop aspirations, which were there right from the beginning. It's interesting because there's a lot of these alternative influences from all over the place, and part of that might have to do with the scene, right? Lots of bands that are sort of exploring the same ideas, but at the root of it, you know, Kawatani has spoke of Spitz being his ideal at some point, and to have this sort of chart pop rock be right at the centre of the songwriting and be a focal point from the beginning, you know, it's this nice contrast. You can actually access archived images of their MySpace, and it's interesting to look at their friends, the things that they've added. Toe are on there, sort of legendary Japanese math group, and Mogwai, a band from my own sort of local area. Looking at archived posts and press, they played more shows from 2011 into 2012 in the lead up to releasing some more recorded material. Though they were building a following, Kacho left the band in 2012, being replaced briefly by Mariko Wada on bass. This lineup released the mini-album Sayonara Subarashi Sakai in April 2012. This was the first of 2 mini-albums released that year on Space Shower Music's Eninal label. It was engineered by Toe's Mino Takaki, and there's quite a huge leap in production. A music video was shot for the song Midori no Shoujo, and the release was promoted by Tower Records. This gave the band some great visibility, and they were poised to make the most of it, given the fact that they had a good live show already, pretty steady image, and a sound that was quite identifiable. A follow-up came in September, same year, called Nagasa Nite, and it's kind of more of the same, but the songs are really good on this one. There's one that I can never remember the name of exactly. I'll put it here. Brilliant song, like a really heavy riff in it as well. By this point though, the band had parted ways with WADA, and moving into 2013, they were working on a full-length release. That album came out on February 6, 2013, and it came to be known as This, which is another long title that I can never quite remember how to say. It's the thing with Japanese, you know, there's so many words that you use every day and you think, oh yeah, that's easy. And then you see a title that has a few words that you never use. Difficult to remember. Track 1, Sweet Spider, was my introduction to the band sometime around 2014. I seen it online and I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's for this reason and a couple of others that this is one of my favourite albums. There's a little bit of nostalgia bias, there's some good memories, but there's also some really good songs on this. I feel like the early sound of the band, which is kind of shifted and it's kind of a different group now, but that early sound is kind of perfected on this album. One in particular that sticks with me is Dakishimete, which is sort of a rare survivor from this period. Outside of their anniversary shows, they still play this live occasionally. In a Real Sound interview that I cited early on, Kawatani notes that this album might not have been received the way he hoped, but the reasoning isn't exactly very clear. The album served them well though, adding another strong release to their portfolio. The year prior, Kawatani and Kacho had reunited to work on Gesu no Kiwami Otome. They released a couple of EPs that generated a bit of a buzz, and now Kawatani was fronting 2 successful indie groups. The interest generated from all these projects at this point had attracted major label attention, and by 2014, both these groups were signed to Warner Music Japan's Unboard label. They both released their major debuts on the same day, April 2nd, 2014. This actually leads us back to that Real Sound interview, because it was done around that time. In a lot of interviews from that time, Kawatani is talking about this line between alternative and pop kind of disappearing. He mentions groups like Kuruli, who had a bit of like an alternative rock appeal in the late 90s, but are now considered like a pop group, right? They're considered J-pop. He also mentions Clambomb. Going further, he very clearly sets out his own pop aspirations, saying that he's worked at growing the numbers and that his ultimate goal is a #1 album on the Oricon charts. In 2015, drummer Ota had left the band after recording on Shiawase ga Afuretara. He comments in a statement that he's really proud of the album and cites a disagreement in direction for the band as his reason for leaving. It seems clear to me, taking these 2 things together, that Kawatani's vision for the band is that we're going to go in this pop direction, and maybe he felt that, well, you know, I thought we were doing this for the scene. That's what I can garner from it anyway. Shiawase ga Afuretara and the album the year prior, Anomachi Records, were shooting them into the next level of success, right? When I went to the 15-year anniversary tour, I noticed a disproportionately large response to songs from these albums. It could be that they don't play them often, but it had the feel of nostalgia to me. Not nostalgia in the sense of, you know, someone living overseas who discovered the music and sort of slowly found the newer albums as time went on. It was a kind of nostalgia of, oh, I'm 30 years old now and this came out when I was in high school or I was in university. That kind of feeling. Ota was replaced by drummer Eitaru Sato, and together with Ryosuke Gocho on bass, they have remained in the lineup since. 2015 to 2016, Indigo's Natsuyo no Magic was a big hit for them, and Gesu no Kiwami Otome's Ryosebai finally gave Kawatani and his crew their #1 album. It also marked a point of transition where Kawatani was working as a songwriter for other people, including big groups like SMAP. But to balance out any glazing of Kawatani in his music, I have to mention that there are controversies that have surrounded him at certain times, the biggest of which being the Becky scandal, which you can make up your own mind about separating the art from the artist, and it's certainly not my place to discuss the moral character of any one individual person. I don't know everyone's situation. In this case, you kind of can't separate them, right? Because the controversy generated only made his name more high profile, and you can't really tell me that being involved in a major nationwide scandal that everyone knows about and having a number one album and having your music be the most relevant possibly that it's ever been aren't connected. To this day, there are times where I tell people, oh yeah, I like Indigo Land, and they go, I don't know that band. And then I say, Enon Kawatani, and they say, oh, Bicky. Indigo has revisited some of their younger energy, right? On recent albums, there's been very up-tempo rock songs that are reminiscent of stuff that would have been on an Omichi record, but the music has evolved into more sort of R&B or hip-hop influenced music. There's a lot of funk. It's just generally a bit more, there's a pop bass, and then there's all of these little influences from all over the place. For me, there was always a plan for them to make it. Kawatani and his group were obviously very good at networking. The fact that they were working with To's Minotakake on their first mini album, the fact that they were successful in making it onto this compilation, the pop aspirations that have been set out, to me it seems obvious that they weren't here to play, right? They were here to play the game. And their plan A was to make it, and plan B was to make it. You obviously can't discount luck. And a lot of it is, luck plus right place, right time, plus a bit of hard work. All of this has really paid off for them. They tour nationwide in Japan, selling out shows. Their merchandise, just from what I can tell from seeing how much there is and the way that they use the fan club, I imagine it's very profitable for them. They've been able to do some shows in Asia, sort of South Korea, Taiwan. They'll go and tour. Not so much in the West, but, compared with contemporaries like Trico, who I would say were a bit more ballsy, they found a place in the global kind of math rock community, which allowed them to do that, right? There's still a lot of Japanese bands that they play to the home market, which is very strong and in a lot of cases predictable. So it's safe to just stay here, slowly build up. And if you're lucky enough to be on a major label and have support and build an audience, why take excessive risk? Just in the mindset of like a Japanese band. For me, I was stuck in Scotland back in the early 2010s. I was in high school, right? So I wasn't here to be able to experience the scene that Indigo Land came out of. A scene that's really inspired me, right? I think of bands like Tokyo Shoegazer, and maybe they weren't exactly in the same space, but that sound, the kind of guitar playing, the songwriting, the chord choices, all of these little things have inspired me and found their way into my own music. Selfishly, I would love to have been there as like a sort of young adult, enjoying all of this music and watching it all come to life. But I've always got the videos, so that's something.